So today we're talking about ecological succession. The definition of succession is the gradual replacement of one ecological community by another until reaching a point of stability. And the stability means if the ecological community is stable, it will stay the same if left undisturbed. So there's no fire or plowing, then whatever is living there is going to remain pretty much the same over time. When we start succession, we start with what we call a pioneer species. A pioneer species is the first species to come into a cleared or lifeless area. So examples of the first pioneer species that are going to come into an area that has never had life before, that is only rock, would be a lichen or an algae, things that do not need a lot of resources. If we're talking about an area where there's been a fire or it's been plowed over or clear cut, then the pioneer species is going to be something more like a grass or a weed. And then the climax community is the final stable community that will remain in an area if you leave it undisturbed. It will be relatively unchanged. The climax community in our area is reflective of our biome. It is a deciduous forest, so a forest with lots of trees that lose their leaves during the winter. Okay, so this is step one of primary succession. This is an area that was lifeless, so just rock. Maybe a new island has popped up out of the ocean from some volcanic activity. We're starting with just rocks. First species are pioneer species. Like I said, they need little and they begin to break down the rock. So the algae, lichen, moss, those are pioneer species. They will start growing. Their little roots are powerful and they'll start crumbling the rock, and they'll start to die. And that's another important thing, because as living things die, they decay and we start to get soil. So over a long period of time of these moss and lichen and pioneer species breaking down the rock, we start to get a thin layer of soil. So fast forward maybe 50 to 100 years, the pioneer species begin to die, soil forms a thin layer, and grasses and weeds grow. That brings insects. So we start to get a little bit of soil that the grass and the flowers can grow in, and they have stronger and larger root systems, and the roots start to grow down and break up the rock even faster. We bring insects in to feed off the small plants, and we have more things that are dying and decaying. So our layer of soil will begin to get thicker. And again, over time, we have more soil because now we have insects and plants that are dying and decaying. We have more roots breaking up the rock, so the rock layer is getting thinner. And as we get shrubs and trees growing, because of the thicker soil, that will bring more plants and animals in. So we'll have squirrels and rabbits and birds, as well as more insects. And all these things are going to continue to die and decay over time. You usually get evergreens first because they're really fast-growing trees. But as these deciduous shrubs grow bigger and we get deciduous trees, they will actually end up shading out the evergreens. They're better at competing for light. So after, a few hundred years, we're going to reach what's called our climax community. And in our area, that, like I said, the climax community would be deciduous forest. Now we're going to have larger animals, maybe fox, deer, along with the rabbits and the squirrels and the insects and the birds. And you're going to get these larger trees and more plants to provide food for all these animals. Okay? So again, a climax community is reached, a forest with many plants and animal species. It will stay fairly stable if left alone. If there is a disaster, like a fire, or if humans come in and cut everything down, secondary succession will begin, and the forest will eventually return. I just want to mention the difference between what we call primary succession and secondary succession. Both are gradual replacement of an ecological communities over time until stability and still climax the community is established. But primary succession is succession that starts in a lifeless area, just rock. It takes longer because we have to build up that soil. Secondary succession is when the soil is already there. So it happens after a fire or a clear cutting, some sort of natural disaster. It doesn't take as long to reach the climax community because we're going to start with already having soil. So we're going to start with the weeds and the grasses coming in because the soil is already there. We don't have to go all the way back to barren rock. Okay? That's ecological succession. If you watch any area, we're fighting succession all the time when we mow our lawns. If you don't mow your lawn, you'll start to see bigger weeds and shrubs trying to grow. Cutting the lawn keeps it down, and you're keeping that deciduous forest from growing in front of your house. Nature always wants to reach its climax community for that area.